In the darkness before dawn on November 29, 1981, a fishing boat drifting off California's Catalina Island came across a body floating face-up in the cold Pacific Ocean. It was Natalie Wood. One of Hollywood's brightest stars was dead at just 43 years old. She was still wearing her red down jacket over a white nightgown and socks, as though she had never expected to leave the warmth of the yacht that night. Bruises marked her arms, wrists, and legs. A small inflatable dinghy floated nearby, but no one could explain with certainty how she had ended up in the water. There was no witness who admitted seeing her fall. No one could say exactly when she entered the ocean. Then, nearly 30 years later, everything changed. The captain of Splendor stepped forward and claimed investigators had never been told the full truth about that night. His words reopened one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries and forced detectives to ask a chilling question all over again. Thanksgiving weekend in 1981 was supposed to be a quiet escape. Natalie Wood and her husband, Robert Wagner, had taken their 60-foot yacht, Splendor, to Catalina Island off the California coast. Joining them was Christopher Walken, Natalie's co-star in the film Brainstorm, along with the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern. What began as a relaxing holiday would become the last 24 hours of Natalie's life. On the evening of November 28th, the group went ashore and had dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant. Staff and customers later remembered seeing them drinking together. According to later accounts, conversations about Natalie's growing friendship with Christopher Walken became increasingly uncomfortable. Wagner reportedly didn't like how close the two had become while filming. Whether it was jealousy, alcohol, or a combination of both, something was clearly bothering him. After dinner, the four returned to Splendor. The yacht was anchored just offshore in the dark waters near Catalina. According to Captain Dennis Davern, everyone continued drinking after they got back. Wagner and Walken reportedly kept talking in the salon while Natalie became quieter. The evening that had started with laughter was slowly turning tense. It suggested she was upset after the conversation between Wagner and Walken became heated. According to the people aboard Splendor, Natalie Wood was no longer with them. Robert Wagner said Natalie had gone to bed while he stayed behind talking with Christopher Walken. He later claimed that when he eventually checked the cabin, she was gone. He noticed the yacht's inflatable dinghy was missing too, leading him to believe she may have untied it herself. Captain Dennis Davern would later tell a very different story. Years after Natalie's death, Davern claimed Wagner and Walken had been arguing about Natalie's career and her growing success. He alleged the argument became heated and that Natalie tried to calm the situation before leaving the room. Davern also claimed Wagner was angry after Natalie walked away, and that the atmosphere aboard the yacht had become tense long before anyone realized she was missing. These were allegations Davern made decades later and have been disputed. One detail continued to trouble investigators. If everyone believed Natalie had simply taken the dinghy, why wasn't the Coast Guard called immediately? Instead, valuable time passed before anyone reported her missing. By the time help arrived, the Pacific Ocean had already swallowed whatever had happened during those missing minutes. No witness ever admitted seeing Natalie enter the water. No witness claimed to have heard her cry for help. Just after daybreak on November 29th, search crews found Natalie Wood floating in the cold water a short distance from Splendor. The inflatable dinghy was drifting nearby, but it offered no clear answer to what had happened during the night. The medical examiner's report immediately raised difficult questions. Natalie had bruises on both arms, one wrist, her knees, and her legs. There were also abrasions on her body. At the time, investigators believed many of those injuries could have been caused as she struggled in the water or while trying to climb back into the dinghy. Her official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning, with hypothermia and alcohol playing a role. For years, that was where the case ended. But as the investigation was examined again decades later, those injuries received fresh attention. The pattern of the bruises became one of the most debated parts of the case. Some forensic experts questioned whether every injury could be explained by an accidental fall into the ocean. Others maintained they were consistent with someone striking the dinghy or the side of the yacht while trying to survive in rough water. The uncertainty only deepened the mystery. Natalie had been found wearing a thin white nightgown beneath a heavy red jacket and wool socks. To many investigators, it seemed unusual. If she had simply gone to secure the dinghy, why had she stepped outside dressed that way in the middle of a cold November night? If she had planned to leave the yacht, where was she intending to go? The ocean offered no answers. There were no eyewitnesses. For almost 30 years, the official explanation remained largely untouched. Then, in 2011, the man who had been at the center of that night decided he could no longer stay silent. Captain Dennis Davern publicly claimed that the original investigation had never heard the full story. Speaking in television interviews and later in his book, he said he had kept quiet for decades because he felt pressure in the aftermath of Natalie's death. According to Davern, the events aboard Splendor were far more volatile than the public had been led to believe. He alleged that Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken had argued intensely that night, with Natalie caught in the middle. He also claimed Wagner smashed a wine bottle during the confrontation, something Wagner has denied. Davern further alleged that after Natalie disappeared, Wagner did not want anyone to immediately call for help and told him to wait. These claims have been disputed, but they dramatically changed how many people viewed the case. Perhaps Davern's most chilling allegation was that Natalie could have still been alive in the water for some time. He claimed he believed cries for help may have been heard that night, but that no immediate rescue was launched. There has never been conclusive evidence proving this happened, yet the allegation became one of the most disturbing parts of the reopened investigation. Davern admitted that he had not told investigators everything in 1981. Captain Dennis Davern's allegations did something that had seemed impossible for decades. They brought Natalie Wood's death back under active investigation. In November 2011, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department officially reopened the case. Detectives announced they wanted to re-examine the evidence in light of new information that had come forward. Witnesses were interviewed again. Old statements were compared. Investigators began looking once more at the timeline aboard Splendor. The biggest change came from the medical examiner. In 2012, after reviewing the evidence, the coroner amended Natalie's death certificate. The cause of death was no longer listed simply as accidental drowning. It was changed to drowning and other undetermined factors. The amendment also noted that some of the bruises and abrasions on her body could not be clearly explained by the original investigation. It was a significant shift. The coroner did not say Natalie had been murdered, but officials also said they could no longer confidently state that her injuries had occurred only after she entered the water. For the first time, the original conclusion was publicly called into question. Detectives made another striking admission. They said there were conflicting accounts from the people who had been aboard the yacht that night, and some of those statements had changed over the years. Exactly what happened during the final hour before Natalie disappeared remained unclear. After more than 30 years, the mystery had not become simpler. As the investigation continued, attention increasingly turned toward the one person who had been closest to Natalie Wood that night, her husband, Robert Wagner. For years, Wagner had maintained the same position. He said Natalie had likely left the yacht on her own and that her death was a tragic accident. Through interviews and statements from his representatives, he consistently denied any involvement in harming her. But investigators were no longer treating the case as they had in 1981. In 2018, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department publicly identified Wagner as a person of interest in the investigation. Detectives emphasized that this did not mean he had been charged with a crime. Instead, They said there were important questions they still wanted answered about the events aboard Splendor. According to investigators, Wagner had declined to be interviewed again after the case was reopened. Detectives also stated that some of the accounts given over the years did not fully match the physical evidence or each other. Those inconsistencies became one of the reasons the investigation remained open. Despite the renewed scrutiny, no criminal charges were ever filed. No court determined exactly how Natalie entered the water. No witness ever provided a complete account that resolved every unanswered question. More than 4 decades after that November night, the case remains officially unsolved. The Pacific Ocean gave investigators a body, a drifting dinghy, and a handful of clues, but the truth about Natalie's final moments has never been fully recovered. That is why her death continues to haunt Hollywood. Not because people know what happened, but because, after all these years, they still don't. More than 4 decades have passed since Natalie Wood disappeared into the darkness off Catalina Island, yet the final chapter of her life remains unfinished. The woman who spent a lifetime in front of cameras left behind one of Hollywood's least understood mysteries. Investigators reopened the case. The official cause of death was changed. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. New allegations surfaced. But the one answer that mattered most never came. What happened during the final minutes aboard Splendor? Was Natalie trying to secure the drifting dinghy, as the original investigation suggested? Did an argument lead to a tragic chain of events? Or did something happen aboard the yacht that has never been fully revealed? No one has been convicted. No official reconstruction has answered every question. And the only person who truly knew what happened never came back to tell it. Perhaps that is why this case refuses to disappear. It isn't simply the death of a famous actress. It's the silence surrounding it. A silence filled with missing minutes, changing stories, unexplained injuries, and a truth that seems forever trapped somewhere between the deck of a yacht and the cold waters of the Pacific. On that November night in 1981, the ocean returned Natalie Wood's body. But whatever happened before she entered the water has never surfaced. And after all these years, it remains one of Hollywood's darkest and most haunting mysteries.